There comes a moment in your journey when heaven closes every familiar door. Friends who once understood you begin to fade. The laughter around you grows distant. You look around and realize you are walking alone. It feels like a storm has taken everything. But my friend, listen, this is not your endboring. This is the sacred moment when the hand of destiny separates you for something greater. You see, the chosen ones always walk a narrow path. It is not a path of popularity, but of purpose. When God sets his eyes upon you, he doesn't send crowds, he sends calling. And calling has a price. It strips you of attachments that keep your spirit heavy. It teaches you to love without clinging, to give without expecting, and to serve without needing recognition. There is a reason heaven isolates you. You are being purified from dependency. When you depend on approval, you lose your authority. But Weberian, you are detached from the opinions of men. You rise into the power of divine confidence. Detachment is not coldness, it is clarity. It is the stillness of knowing who you are, even when no one affirms it. The chosen ones walk alone because they are learning to hear what others cannot. In the silent burr-e of solitude, the spirit begins to whisper. You begin to see patterns in pain, purpose in disappointment, and divine order in disruption. Every tear you cried was not wasted, it watered the soil of your next season. Every person who left you made room for heaven to draw closer. When everything changberes, you are not losing control, you are being realigned. The divine never takes without preparing to multiply. You may be in a valley now, but valleys are where foundations are laid. The higher your destiny, the deeper your preparation must be. And sometimes preparation feels like isolation. Do not curse your loneliness. Do not despise your silence. In the quiet, your faith is being restructured. In the stillness, your vision is being renewed. Heaven is removing your dependence on noise so you can finally hear your true name. Those who walk alone carry a fire that others cannot understand. Tibar IR hearts burn with an unseen purpose. Their confidence comes from the unseen realm. They are misunderstood because they live by revelation, not reputation. They obey voices that others ignore. They build in deserts and believe in storms. Everything changes when you stop seeking to belong and start choosing to become. The crowd will always celebrate comfort, but the chosen celebrate transformation. You are not called to fit in. You are called to stand out, to stand firm, and to stand alone if necessary. So when you find yourself alone, don't have fear. Lift your head. You are walking where few have walked. You are being trusted with divine secrets that only solitude can reveal. The silence you feel now will one day echo with the sound of purpose fulfilled. And when the time comes, heaven will send those who recognize your light, not to complete you, but to accompany your mission. For those who are chosen never truly walk alone. They walk with destiny beside them. Everything changes when you understand that solitude is not emptiness. It is divine fullness in disguise. The chosen walk alone, not because they are forgotten, but because they are being formed. Walk on, chosen one. The world may not understand your silence, but heaven celebrates your strength. Divine isolation is not rejection, but refinement. When the hand of heaven rests upon your life, you will notice something begin to shift. The circle that once surrounded you will start to shrink. The voices that once cheered for you will grow silent. The familiar places that once felt like home will begin to feel uncomfortable. You will try to hold on, but everything will start slipping away, not because you are being punished, but because you are being prepared. There is a difference between rejection and refinement. Rejection pushes you out, but refinement pulls you up. What feels like people walking away is often heaven removing what can no longer travel with you. When you are chosen, you are not permitted to live like everyone else. There is a sacred demand on your life. You are being called out of the ordinary, separated from the noise, and invited into divine silence. Isolation becomes the forge of destiny, where your character is tempered and your heart is purified. In solitude, you learn what cannot be taught in crowds. You begin to recognize that your worth is not found in acceptance, but in alignment with divine purpose. The world sees your isolation as loneliness, but heaven calls it consecration. There are seasons when God hides you, not because He has forgotten you, but because He is finishing you. You are not invisible, you are being incubated. Like gold in the furnace, you are being refined to shine brighter. Every trial, every misunderstanding, every betrayal is part of that purification. The chosen ones do not grow through comfort, they grow through fire. And in that fire, all that is false burns away until only what is pure remains. You must understand that divine isolation is never an accident. It is intentional. When heaven wants to elevate you, it first separates you. You cannot soar if you are still attached to those who are content crawling. You cannot hear divine instruction if you are still surrounded by human distraction. So heaven, in its mercy, begins to close doors. It begins to silence noise. It begins to remove props you once leaned on. You will try to run back to comfort, but comfort will no longer recognize you. That is when you know the transformation has begun. Refinement is uncomfortable because it exposes what you have depended on. You start to see how much of your peace was built on people, how much of your identity was shaped by opinions, how much of your worth depended on being seen. In isolation, those illusions fade, and you are left with the truth of who you really are. It is there in the quiet that heaven whispers, "You are enough, because I am Whitber, it's you." That whisper becomes your strength. You see, divine isolation does not make you smaller. It makes you sharper. It cuts away distraction so you can focus on destiny. It breaks emotional dependencies so you can build spiritual resilience. It removes false support so you can stand firm in divine authority. The chosen are not shaped in applause, they are shaped in anonymity. When the noise of the world is stripped away, the voice of the Spirit becomes unmistakably clear. Every great calling carries a season of separation. Moses was hidden for 40 years. Joseph was confined before he was crowned. David was anointed but still sent back to the field. Even the strongest vessels are tested in silence before they are trusted with influence. So if you are walking through isolation, do not resist it. Embrace it as the sacred training ground of purpose. What you call loneliness, heaven calls leadership. Divine refinement transforms your pain into perception. You begin to see not through the eyes of emotion, but through the eyes of eternity. You understand that every delay carries design, every loss contains lesson, every silence hides strategy. You learn to rest in the unseen, to trust when nothing makes sense, to believe when everything breaks. That is when you stop asking, "Why me?" and start declaring, "Prepare me." Those who endure divine isolation come out with a weight of wisdom that the world cannot manufacture. They no longer seek to impress, they seek to impact. They no longer crave validation, they crave revelation. Their spirit carries authority because it has been tested in stillness. They have walked through fire without losing their faith, and now their presence carries peace. When heaven refines you, it is not to make you more acceptable to men, but more available to God. You will emerge with clarity that confusion cannot shake, faith that storms cannot drown, and purpose that time cannot erase. You will look back one day and realize the isolation that once broke you was the same place where you were rebuilt. So if you find yourself alone today, do not mourn it. Do not fight it. You are not being rejected, you are being refined. The silence around you is not emptiness. It is evidence that heaven is working in secret. The refining fire is not sent to destroy you, but to define you. Let it do its work. When it is finished, you will rise not as who you were, but as who you were destined to become. Detachment is the language of power. It is the sacred silence between the world's noise and heaven's whisper. It is not indifference, but divine focus. It is the moment when your heart ceases to chase after validation, and your spirit begins to draw STPR strength from divine identity. Detachment is not the absence of emotion, it is the mastery of it. It is when your peace is no longer tied to people, and your joy is no longer dependent on outcomes. When you reach this state, you walk through storms with calmness, because your anchor is not in circumstance, but in conviction. The reason many are exhausted is because their emotions are chained to things they cannot control. They are tossed by every opinion, shaken by every disappointment, enslaved by every expectation. But those who are chosen must learn a higher way, the way of detachment. Detachmibar NT is the power to love deeply without losing yourself, to serve faithfully without seeking recognition, and to give generously without expecting return. It is the posture of spiritual maturity that allows you to live in the world but not be consumed by it. There comes a time when heaven will begin to disconnect you from attachments that weaken your spirit. People you once leaned on will begin to distance themselves. Opportunities that once thrilled you will lose their pull. Conversations that once defined you will lose meaning. You will try to hold on, but something within will whisper, "Let go." That whisper is not loss, it is liberation. You are being prepared to stand in your true power, where your joy flows from purpose, not popularity. Detachment is the divine art of standing firm in your identity while everything around you shifts. It is the stillness of knowing who you are. Even WBR, hen, no one affirms it. It is looking at the storm and saying, "My peace is not for sale." It is walking through betrayal without bitterness, through change without fear, through rejection without resentment. The chosen must learn this discipline, for purpose will always require the shedding of depebra and dents. You cannot carry divine authority while being addicted to approval. You cannot speak with heavenly power while fearing human opinion. When your heart becomes detached, your mind becomes clear. You begin to see how temporary everything truly is: the applause, the criticism, the gain, the loss. You stop reacting and start discerning. You no longer live to prove, you live to please the one who sent you. You begin to understand that what you let go of does not weaken you, it strengthens you. Because in detachment, you make room for divine clarity. Emotional detachment is not suppression, it is surrender. It is not coldness, it is control. It is the ability to feel deeply without being ruled by what you feel. You can cry without collapsing. You can love without losing yourself. You can give without depleting your soul. When your emotions bow to your spirit, you enter a realm of peace. ABRE, world cannot understand. That peace is power. That calmness is authority. That balance is maturity. The truly powerful are not those who dominate others, but those who have dominion over themselves. When you master detachment, you no longer chase people, you attract purpose. You no longer beg for ABR attention, you carry presence. You no longer need to be understood, you are content being guided. Detachment transforms your relationships, your work, your faith. You stop clinging to what fades, and you start investing in what remains. You realize that losing people or things cannot take away yo or PBOCE, because peace was never theirs to give, it was heaven's gift from the beginning. Detachment is a divine pruning. Heaven cuts away what hinders your growth, not to harm you, but to heal you. Every time you release something you thought you needed, you discover you are lighter, freer, stronger. You begin to trust that what is meant for you will never require begging, manipulation, or fear. You learn to move with grace, not grasping. You learn to flow, not force. That is the secret of those who walk in divine confidence. They have learned to let go. The path of purpose is narrow because it demands discipline. The chosen cannot afford to be entangled by every emotion. Their spirit must be steady, their vision clear, their heart unoffended. Detachment allows you to serve with pure motives, to forgive without conditions, and to rise without pride. It separates those who are called from those who are merely curious. For the ones who are chosen are trusted with influence that must not be polluted by insecurity. When you detach, everything changes. You begin to see people as assignments, not anchors, challenges as training, not torment. You stop seeking comfort and start seeking clarity. YBR, our prayers shift from give me to shape me. And as your heart releases its grip on what is temporary, heaven places in your hands what is eternal. So, do not fear detachment. It is not the death of connection. It is the purification of it. It is learning to love purely, serve freely, and live outwardly, without the weight of needing approval. The more you release, the more you rise. The more you detach, the more you align. Detachment is not losing everything, it is gaining yourself. And when you gain yourself, you gain the power to walk in your divine purpose with unshakable peace and unstoppable grace. When everything changes, you are being repositioned. Change is not chaos, it is choreography. It may look like your life is falling apart, but in the unseen realm, divine hands are rearranging every piece. What feels like loss is often the quiet movement of heaven, placing you exactly where you are meant to be. The chosen never lose, they are redirected. They are not being punished, they are being positioned. Every shift, every ending, every unexpected turn is a step closer to the place destiny has already prepared. Change always begins with discomfort. It unsettles what you thought was secure. It disturbs the familiar, confronts the comfortable, and challenges your sense of control. That's why it feels painful, because transformation always demands surrender. You cannot be repositioned while clinging to what once was. The hands of heaven cannot move you while your grip is still on what you used to be. But when you let go, when you release your need to understand everything, that is when you begin to see the divine pattern emerging from the chaos. There are moments when life will strip away everything that made you feel safe. Relationships end. Opportunities fade. The future looks uncertain. And your heart begins to ask, why is everything changing? But if you look closely, you will see the fingerprints of divine design. What you call endings, heaven calls transitions. What you call losses, heaven calls alignments. Every change is either removing what can no longer serve your purpose or preparing space for what will. When everything changes, the first temptation is to resist. We cling to what is familiar because the unknown feels threatening. But the truth is, the familiar can become the greatest enemy of faith. Faith does not live in what you can predict, it thrives in what you cannot control. Every great calling requires a crossing, a moment when you leave behind certainty for the sake of destiny. Change is heaven. Invitation to trust again, to move again, to believe again. You see, God never changes His purpose, but He often changes your position. He will move you out of environments that no longer fit your growth. He will close doors you begged Him to keep open. He will disrupt your comfort to reveal your capacity. Because where you started is not where you are meant to stay. The chosen are travelers of destiny, not settlers of familiarity. Weber and heaven begins to shift your surroundings. It is not because you failed. it is because you have finished that chapter. Sometimes divine repositioning looks like rejection. People walk away and you feel abandoned. Plans collapse and you feel forgotten. But rejection is often redirection in disquisber E. The very thing that hurt you is what will push you toward your next level. The disappointment that broke your heart was actually a divine detour, saving you from lesser paths. Heaven will sometimes remove what you wanted to reveal what you needed. Change tests your faith. It forces you to find STBR ability, not in circumstance but in conviction. When everything around you shifts, you begin to ask, what cannot be shaken? And the answer is always the same. Your purpose, your identity, your divine calling. Those remain unchanging, even when everything else moves. That's why the chosen learn to SBR tend, still on the inside while the world moves on the outside. Their peace is not found in predictability, but in trust. When heaven repositions you, it is never backward, it is always forward, even if it feels like loss. There are seasons when God will move you into obscurity, not because you have Faberland, but because He is protecting you from premature exposure. There are seasons when everything slows down, not because you are behind, but because you are being strengthened for the next acceleration. The divine timeline never runs late. Every change is a preparation for manifestation. The process of repositioning often feels like breaking. You will wonder if you are strong enough. You will question if you missed your moment. But every seed feels buried before it rises. Burial and planting look the same from the outside, but one ends in death while the other ends in life, when everything. Inspirational, it may feel like you are being buried, but you are being planted. And soon what was hidden will rise. The chosen must learn to move with heaven's rhythm. Do not hold on to what heaven has already released. Do not mourn doors that were never meant to remain open. When everything changes, heaven has declared, it's time. Time to grow beyond what was. Time to release what you've outgrown. Time to step into the next dimension of who you are becoming. You are not being displaced, you are being placed. The divine rearrangement you are experiencing is not confusion, it is constructio N. You are being set up for visibility, influence, and purpose that your old position could not sustain. Every shift is aligning you with divine timing. Every ending is preparing the stage for your next beginning. So when everything changes, don't panic, perceive. Heaven is speaking through movement. Life is not falling apart. It's falling into place. Trust the shifts, embrace the changes, and walk boldly into the unknown. You are being repositioned not just for survival, but for significance. Walking alone reveals the voice of the Spirit. It is in solitude that the deepest conversations with Heaven are heard. When the noise fades and the crowd disappears, something sacred happens, the silence begins to speak. The chosen are often misunderstood because they are trained in silence while others are distracted by noise. Loneliness becomes the classroom of revelation. The Spirit does not compete with the chatter of men, He waits for the stillness of a surrendered heart. That is why those who are chosen must walk alone for a season. They are not being isolated to suffer, but to hear. There comes a moment when every external voice loses its power, and you are left with nothing but your taberets and your faith. It is uncomfortable at first, because the human heart craves companionship, recognition, validation, but the Spirit cannot reveal divine secrets to a heart still addicted to noise. When heaven wants to speak clearly, it first clears the room. It silences the crowd so you can recognize the whisper. The path of solitude is where discernment is born. It is where you begin to distinguish between emotion and revelation, between impulse and instruction. When you walk alone, you discover how many of your decisions were guided by fear of loss or desire for approval. You begin to sever that many of the things you once called relationships were actually attachments. Many of the things you once called purpose were only distractions. Solitude has a way of stripping away illusions until all that remains is truth. And in that truth, the voice of the Spirit becomes unmistakable. You no longer guess you know. You no longer wander, you walk with direction. You no longer beg for confirmation, you move in conviction. The Spirit speaks differently in isolation. His voice does not shout, it settles. It is the calm that comes after the storm, the peace that floods your heart. Everything else has failed. In solitude, he teaches you not just information, but transformation. You begin to understand that revelation is not only heard, it is experienced. The Spirit begins to show you who you are, not who others say you are. He reveals the strength hidden beneath your scars, the wisdom concealed in your wounds, the purpose buried in your pain. Chosen one must pass through this sacred corridor of solitude. It is where faith is purified and motives are exposed. It is where the applause of the crowd can no longer manipulate your calling. In the quiet, the Spirit becomes your kobar unseller, your comforter, your companion. He teaches you to depend on His voice above all else. You begin to wake up with clarity and go to sleep with peace, even when nothing in your life has changed, because His presence becomes your stability. When you learn to walk alone, you stop fearing abandonment. You realize you were never truly alone, only separated for training. The chosen do not find themselves in solitude, they find their assignment. Every prophet, every leader, every vessel of destiny has been led into the wilderness before being released into the world. The wilderness is not punishment, it is preparation. It is where the Spirit downloads blueprints that cannot be received in public places. The solitude of the chosen is not empty, it is holy. Heaven uses silence as a language. In that silence, your heart is refined to hear frequencies others cannot. The Spirit begins to unfold mysteries in your spirit that logic cannot interpret. You start to see divine timing in delays, divine purpose in pain, divine strength in waiting. You realize that walking alone was never about loneliness, it was about alignment. You are being aligned with heaven's rhythm, trained to move when He moves and stop when He stops. Those who never embrace solitude remain dependent on noise. They need people to affirm them, circumstances to sustain them, and emotions to guide them. But those who have walked alone with the Spirit become unshakable. Their peace is internal, their strength is spiritual, their discernment is sharp. They carry a quiet confidence that confuses those who rely on external validation. You can recognize them by their calmness in chaos and their clarity in confusion. They have walked long enough in silence to trust what they cannot see. In solitude, you discover that reverberation is not a lightning strike. It is a steady flame. It grows brighter the more you protect it. Every moment of silence adds oil to your lamp. The chosen guard this oil carefully, for it sustains them when others burn out. They do not rush to speak, they listen first. They do not react, they respond from revelation. Their steps are measured, their words intentional, their hearts anchored. When the Spirit has taught you in silence, you return to the world carrying light. The same solitude that once felt like isolation becomes your strength in the crowd. You no longer depend on company to sustain in your faith, because you have learned to walk with the invisible. You know the sound of the Spirit's whisper amid the world's chaos. You carry divine instruction in your heart, like a compass that never fails. So if you find yourself walking alone, do not despair. The silence is not punishment, it is permission. Heaven is trusting you with a depth of relationship few ever experience. You are being tuned to hear what others ignore, being prepared to lead where others hesitate. In solitude, you are being taught the language of the Spirit, and once you learn it, You will never be lost again. Walk in Burji alone is not a sign of absence, it is evidence of intimacy. The chosen walk alone so they can walk with God. There comes a sacred moment when you finally understand that every silence, every separation, every change was never meant to break you. It was meant to build you. You see now that divine isolation was not rejection, but refinement. Detachment was not loss, but liberation. Every change that shook your world was not destruction, but repositioning. And walking alone was never loneliness. It was the invitation to hear the voice that only speaks in stillness. The chosen ones are not defined by what they have endured, but by what they have become through endurance. Their strength is not loud, it is quiet. Their power is not borrowed from people, it flows from presence. They have learned to walk through fire and come out glowing, not because they were fearless, but because they were faithbar Haful. They understand that purpose is not born in comfort, it is birthed in consecration. Everything changes when you stop fighting the process and start trusting the plan. You stop questioning who left and start thanking heaven for who stayed, because even when everyone walked away, divine presence, NBR, ever did. You stop fearing change and begin embracing it as the rhythm of destiny. You stop craving crowds and start craving clarity. And you realize that walking alone was never about distance, it was about direction. So stand tall in your season of silence. Walk boldly through your time of change. Let go of what no longer fits the future heaven is building through you. For you are not forgotten, you are being formed. You are not behind, you are being prepared. Every lonely road, every hidden season, every painful detachment has been heaven's classroom to make you ready for your divine assignment. When the time comes, the light within you will speak louder than any introduction. The world will see what solitude shaped, what detachment purified, what change aligned, and what divine isolation birthed. You will walk into your destiny not empty, but refined, not broken, but whole, not searching for G, but certain. Because in the end, the chosen never truly walk alone, they walk with destiny beside them and heaven within them.